Hello, and welcome back to the Eldritch Stronghold. I'm Mitchell, or the Guru you knew. In the past week, we've gotten all kinds of spoilers from the new Dragons of Tarkir. Well, the Tarkir set, I think it's called like Dragon Storm or something like that. That looks really cool. Tarkir was one of my favorite sets to play in. And then another things we got spoiled was the Final Fantasy set. We got precons, and we got the set, we got all the product, and there's just a lot of goodies, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan. Today we're going to be talking about one of the precon commanders, and that's Tidus, Yuna's Guardian. He's a 3 mana in the Bant colors. He's a 3/3 human warrior. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. And he also has the cheer ability, which says whenever one or more creatures I control with a counter on them deals combat damage to a player, I may draw a card and proliferate, and I can only do this once each turn. The one or more and the once per turn thing kind of hurts it, but it would be really, really strong if it wasn't worded like this. So what we're going to do with this deck is we're going to build it with some of my favorite counters, and that's shield counters and indestructible counters. That way, pretty much all our creatures are going to be almost unkillable. So let's get into this week's Deck Sesh. So the main things we are looking to do with this deck is create the counters, duplicate the counters, move the counters around to whichever creature we want. And we're going to start things off with the shield counters. So the first card we're going to talk about is Agent's Toolkit. It's a 3 mana artifact clue. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, flying counter, death touch counter, and shield counter. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may move a counter from the Agent Toolkit to that creature. And then you can sacrifice this when all the counters are gone to draw a card. And with your commander, you can duplicate these, and then you can move these even more times. The next card we'll talk about is Brotherhood Outcast. It's a 3 mana 3/2 human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, you may return a target or equipment card with mana value 3 or less to your graveyard battlefield. This one's not too important, but you definitely do want to run like boots and stuff like that in this deck, so this will get that back if it gets destroyed. And the bottom part is put a shield counter on target creature. And if you don't know what a shield counter is if a creature would be dealt damage or destroyed, you just remove the shield counter instead. So it's a pretty good defensive counter. This will allow you just to get one started out, and then your commander can take it from there. The next one is a similar effect to the last one, and this Proud Pack Rhino, a 3 mana 3/3 Rhino. When it enters the battlefield, you may put a shield counter on target permanent, which is different than just a creature. And then you may proliferate, which is really good because you can double up the shield, another shield counter you have, or any other counter you might have on the battlefield. The next card is Family's Favor. It's a 3 mana enchantment. Whenever you attack, you put a shield counter on target attacking creature. Till the end of the turn, it gains when this creature deals combat damage to a player. You move a shield counter from it. If you do, you draw a card. You already want to deal combat damage in this deck because of your commander's ability to be able to proliferate if a creature does deal combat damage. This just adds on to that benefit, giving you shield counters for added protection and letting you remove that shield counter to draw a card. And your commander will just let you proliferate it, so you're not actually, that creature that you're using this on is not going to lose all their shield counters, but just one. The next one is Sanctuary Warden. I think this one's pretty cool. It's a 6 mana 5/5 Angel Soldier with flying. When it enters the battlefield with 2 shield counters on it. Whenever this enters the battlefield or attacks, you may remove a shield counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. If you do, you draw a card and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. Next kind of counter we'll be talking about are indestructible counters. Alrighty, so the first one we'll be talking about is Arwen, Mortal Queen. She's a 3 mana 2/2 elf noble. When she enters the battlefield, you get an indestructible counter. She's the cheapest mana cost in this deck that gives us an indestructible counter. You can also pay 1 to remove the indestructible counter from her. And then another target creature gains indestructible until the end of turn, and you put a +1/+1 and a lifelink counter on them, and then you also put a +1/+1 counter and lifelink counter on her. So in total, you're getting 3 different types of counters on the board that your commander can play around with. The next one is a cycle of cards. You can play them all, but I'm just going to talk about one of my favorites, and that's the Dominus Cycle. This is the blue one. For 4 mana, it's a 3/5 Phyrexian Horror. It has flying, and when you proliferate twice instead. Super perfect for our commander. And then it also has the ability to pay 1 and 2 Phyrexian blue, so that's 2 life for each or 2 blue. Remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creature, or planeswalkers you control. That's pretty easy to do in this deck. And you put an indestructible counter on this creature. The other Dominus is making tokens, and the green one is doubling power. Both of them are equally as good. I just didn't want to talk about all three of them in this video. Next one is That Which Was Taken. It's a 5-mana legendary artifact. You pay 4, tap it, put a divinity counter on target permanent other than that which was taken, and each permanent with divinity counter on it is indestructible. So this is a different type of counter, but it does grant indestructible as long as you have this artifact on the battlefield. And if this gets destroyed, then the divinity counters pretty much are useless. But there are ways in this deck to put indestructible counters on this to make sure this stays around as long as possible. Next card is also a cycle, and that's the Mojin cycle. I'm talking about the green one right now, and that's the Mojin of Towering Might. It's a 8 mana 8/8 spirit. When it enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it if it was cast from your hand. So you do have to spend all 8 for that. Should be easy having green in the deck. But you may remove an indestructible counter from the Mojin of Towering Might, and you distribute 8 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, and they gain trample until the end of the turn. The +1/+1 counters are really nice, but the trample is really what we want because our commander wants us to deal combat damage. The last one in this will be the Eagle of Deliverance. It's a 6 mana 5/5 bird soldier. It has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you put an indestructible counter on another target creature you control. So this one lets you choose, so you can just stick it on your commander. Draw a card if that creature has a power 2 or less. That might trigger, it might not, but we're just here for the indestructible counter. Now we're going to talk about other cards that add different type of counters other than the indestructible and the shield counters that we've been talking about, and to make sure you have the right tool for the right job. So the first card we'll be talking about is Avenging Hunt Bonder. It's a 5 mana 3/3 human warrior with double strike, and whenever the Hunt Bonder attacks, you put a double strike counter on another target attacking creature. This one's pretty sick. I like double strike, and just let your commander get the double strike counter, and then just let him proliferate that away. The next card we'll talk about is Invoke the Ancients. It is a 5 mana sorcery. You create 2 4/5 green spirit creature tokens. For each of them, you put your choice of a vigilance counter, a reach counter, or a trample counter on it. So for 5 mana, you're getting 2 4/5 creatures, and then you get your choice. If you need the reach, the vigilance, or the trample counter, you get your choice of 2 out of the 3. So this ain't a bad card. Never thought I'd use this card, but I kind of like it in this deck. Next card is Titanoth Rex. It's a 8 mana or a 9 mana 11/11 dinosaur beast. It has trample, and it has cycling for 2. And when you cycle this, you put a trample counter on a target creature you control. Like I said before, trample is important in this deck, so being able to get a trample counter out there and proliferate that is really, really handy. Next card is Innkeeper's Talent. It's 2 mana. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control, so it gives us a +1/+1 counter to work with. The next level is permanents you control with counters on them, gives reward 2, so it offers protection for our modified creatures. And then if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or a player, put twice that many of each of them counters on that permanent instead, so this works as like a doubling season for counters. The last card is Elsmith Resplendent. This is a 5 mana 5 loyalty planeswalker. It has a +1 where you choose up to 1 target creature. You can put a +1/+1 counter on it, a flying counter, a first strike, a lifelink, or a vigilance counter on it. So this gives you a wide variety of counters to choose from. It's -3. Just look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it. So there's that shield counter we really want. And then this also just lets you get a free 3 or less off the top. And then it's final, it's -7. You create 5 3/3 white angel creature tokens with flying. Probably won't ever do this. We're just going to juggle that +1 and that -3. So our commander is not the only one that will be moving counters. The next cards we'll be talking about are other cards that can move counters. So the first card is Resourceful Defense. It's a 3 mana enchantment. When a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had a counter on it, you put those counters on target permanent you control. And you can pay 5 and move any number of counters from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. It's a good way to move counters around, but also save counters if something dies, just in case you can't remake that counter. And you can also just stash all the counters on this enchantment instead of stashing them on a easily killed creature. The next one is the Ozolith. It's similar to the last one, but this one's an artifact. And whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had a counter on it, you put those counters on the Ozolith. So these counters have to go on the Ozolith. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith to target creature. So this one has to go to the Ozolith. This one has to go to the creature. but it is on the beginning of your combat and you don't have to pay mana for this, so that's kind of nice. The next card is Goldberry, River Daughter. It's 2 mana, 1/3 nymph. You can tap her, you can move a counter of each kind not on Goldberry from another target permanent you control onto Goldberry, and then you may pay 1 blue, tap, move 1 or more counters from Goldberry to another target permanent you control. If you do, you can draw a card. It's a way to move counters around, save counters when somebody's about to die, and even draw a card on top of that. Next card, we even have this effect on a land. It's Nesting Grounds. It taps for colorless, but you can pay 1 and tap it, and you may move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent you control. You can only activate this as a sorcery, but that's okay. The fact that it can move between permanents is really nice. The last card is Contractual Safeguard. It's a 3 mana instant. If you cast the spell during your main phase, you put a shield counter on each creature you control, and then you may choose a kind of counter on a creature you control and put a counter of that kind on each other creature you control. This is a way to spread around any kind of your counters, but it's also really good to get a shield counter on all your creatures. Alright, now we're going to talk about some last minute mentions. These are cards that also just work well with counters or give other benefits to our characters or just care about the counters in general. First one is Strixhaven Stadium. I finally found a really good commander for this card that I like. It's a 3 mana artifact. It taps for a colorless, and you put a point counter on it. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from it. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, you put a point counter on this, and then if there are 10 or more point counters on this, you remove all of them, and that player loses the game. It's a way to one-shot a player eventually. You can proliferate these counters pretty easily. You're going to be dealing combat damage pretty easily. And then having a bunch of this shielded indestructible creatures, you can block pretty easily, so losing point counters ain't going to come very often, at least hopefully. The next one is Kodama of the West Tree. It's a 3 mana spirit. It's a 3/3 with reach. Modified creatures you control have trample. Modified creatures are any equipment, ores you control, and counters are modifications. Whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, which we want already, you search your library for basic land cards, so you're going to be searching while you're dealing combat damage. And the next one is Together Forever. It's a 2 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you support 2, so you get to distribute 2+1/+1 counters on creatures you control. You may pay 1 and you choose target creature with a counter on it, no matter what that counter is. And when that creature dies, this turn you return that creature to its owner, or that card to its owner's hand. This is another way to add on to that indestructible, never dying theme of the deck. The next card is Envoy of the Ancestors. It's a 3 mana human cleric. It's 2/3 with Outlast. You're probably never going to use this Outlast ability, but the bottom half is modified creatures you control have lifelink. So while we're attacking, while we're dealing combat damage, moving counters away or around, gaining life, it would be pretty nice. Keeps us in the game a little longer to proliferate us into a win. The very last card we'll be talking about is Orderic. He's a 4 mana 3/3 human soldier. He doesn't give any counters, but at the beginning of combat, creatures you control gain first strike until the end of turn if a creature you control has first strike. The same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, indestructible, or lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. So you're getting quite a lot of benefits from this creature. Just having a single indestructible counter, a single lifelink counter, or whatever counter you have, grants it to your whole board during combat on your turn, or actually each combat. So this is everybody's turn. So even defensive keywords are handy here. And that'll be it for this deck. This is Tidus from the Final Fantasy set that's coming out in June this year. It looks pretty fun. The commander's not super strong. He's not broken by any means. I just think he just has a really nice slow grind to him, where you're just attacking, growing your army, making them bigger and more protected. As always, let me know down below what you guys think. If there's any cards I forgot that might be really cool in this deck, any ideas you may have for the deck, and which Final Fantasy commander are you most excited for? Just let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.